They're going to take us on that journey. We have Joyce Rhodes, okay, Steve Heaton, and Sharon Bunting. And to get started, before we ask the questions, and by the way, we'll have 3 questions that we've come up with, and they'll each have about 5 minutes to address those questions. And if we finish with the 3 questions, we'll open it up to the group for questions, so just keep in mind what you'd like to ask. But why don't each one of you just take a minute or two and tell us a little bit about yourselves before we get to the questions. You know, how deep are your roots in Kanab? Let's start with Joyce. You're first.
I was young till I got married, and my roots go clear back to Brigham Lawrence Young. We have the same relatives.
We do.
Yes, we do. People that settled Kanab way back then.
Thank you much. Steve?
Well, I was born and raised here, and I'm number 9 of 12 kids, and 4 of them passed away shortly after they were born, so there are really only 8 of us. But I delivered the newspaper here in Kanab for 10 years, and after I left, my dad delivered them. And one of the ironic things was there was a lot of people that didn't have enough money to pay for the newspaper, so when he passed away, we found 316 checks that had never been cashed. So for some of you, you still have money in the bank, but it was a fun time growing up in Kanab. If I had to do it again, I would do it probably the same way.
And I don't know how old Steve is because
91.
First fact check.
Well, we weren't sure. Were we supposed to be honest with this presentation?
Fairly.
I was a gear jammer for Utah Parks for 3 years, and I drove through Kanab, and we had a lot of stories, and I don't know which ones are true and which ones aren't. So we're just putting them all out.
And I know he's kind of old because he graduated in '61, and that's the same year I graduated. So
I could have been retained a few years.
Sharon.
Well, I'm not about to tell you how old I am. It's a lot older than these young people, though. And I was born and raised here. I was the youngest of 9 children. My parents, neither one were born in Kanab, but my mother was born in Alton, Utah. And my dad was born on the old McDonald Ranch that is south of Alton. So my roots go deep. And like Steve, if I had it to do over again, I would probably do the very same thing, only I would do it better. There's always room in my life for improvement.
Okay, and Emily is going to be kind of helping us out here. She's the director of the Kanab City Museum, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what the format is going to be. And Chris Heaton down here is our city council rep. Okay.
Well, I'm going to let you kind of control the format because I see you have a lot better notes there than I do with your question and answer. Thank you again. I know everybody got a great introduction. Thank you again for agreeing to moderate this discussion. Primarily tonight what I'm doing is I'm running the tech because we have quite a few who are viewing online. So when we do the question and answers later, just for the sake of those of you who are online, please feel free to drop any questions or any comments you have in the chat, and I can relay those to the panel. And that's all from me.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, kind of watch him. He's the one timing. We're going to give each person... Remember when I graduated, I can't read those from here.
Orange is 2 minutes, pink is you're done.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Chris. Okay, we're going to start. Each one of the panel members will get the chance to go first. And so we'll just start with Joyce. And I'll read the question, and then we'll go to Steve, and then we'll go to Sharon. So, first question is, how did people typically spend their free time? What were some of the major local events or traditions that you remember from your childhood? You know, recreation, hobbies, socialization, that type of stuff.
Well, first of all, we go clear back, like when we were just little children. That's all we had was free time. And I lived by the creek, so I spent my time in the creek.
And she's pronouncing it properly too.
Is there another way? And mostly watching my brothers get stuck in the quicksand. That was quite fun to watch. That's what I did most of the time. And I lived by the creek till I was about 7. And this was called unsupervised kindergarten or something, because we just went to the creek, and when we got hungry we came home. that was one of the things that we did when I was growing up. And I remember the outdoor toilet, the indoor chamber pot, and the number 2 tub. So I grew up with the same things that you did, enjoying my wintertime. What we did, we would sleigh ride all winter long, and we went dancing all year long, and then in the summertime we just did fun things like 4-H and cousins. And some of the traditions we had was on the 4th of July, we always had homemade root beer and ice cream. And we all had to join the races on the town square. And that was all. We'd get a penny or a nickel or a dime. That was one of the fun things to do. And then on Monday was always wash day. I remember some of the times when we build a fire in the backyard and put on that big tub and fill it with rainwater if you had it. And then we would scrub the clothes, wash the clothes, but the only thing we had for our backyard beautification was a clothesline. We had a clothesline, and that's all we had, just dirt and a clothesline. And then I can remember real quickly someone going through town in a convertible. Someone was driving, someone else was in the driver's or in the passenger seat, and they had a megaphone. Do you remember this? They went through town. We didn't have a radio very often. We had no means of communication. So if something important was going to happen, they went through town with this megaphone and announced what was happening, like a town meeting, or maybe someone passed away. It was quite interesting. And then I can still remember the telephone. And we were little, so we had to go clear up here, and we would call, and the operator would say, "Number, please." And I can't remember if mine was 263J or if that was my favorite cousin. That was her phone number.
Mine was 193J. So
It had a J on the end?
Yeah.
Oh,
Mine
how
was just
interesting.
plain old 5-6.
In Orderville, we didn't even have phones.
Yeah, and then we would meet in the ward hall on Saturdays, and we would watch a reel-to-reel Little Rascals. And I remember Mom had the responsibility of popping the corn, and then we had the responsibility of cleaning it all up after it was over with. One of the fun things. And then every Friday night, as we grew up, we went to the show house, the movie, and watched a movie every Friday night. Didn't matter what it was. It wasn't rated, but it was black and white. And by the time I left home, it cost me 45 cents to go to the movie. Did you raise up a sign yet?
Yeah, I've got one up. You got 20 seconds.
Okay, one more thing. I grew up with a piano. That was my favorite thing. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much. By the way, they're not clotheslines anymore, they're solar dryers. Okay.
Still have a clothesline.
Okay. Steve, you're on.
Okay. Well, I grew up here too. I'm the ninth of 12, and I spent most of my life delivering newspapers to every home in Kanab, and I knew where every person or who lived in every home in Kanab. And we delivered the Deseret News and the Salt Lake Tribune, and we sold the newspapers in the summertime. And we had an experience. We were going by Perry Lodge, and I looked in, and there was John Wayne. He was in a coffee shop there. By the way, we owned the Perry. We bought it in 1978 and sold it 40 years later. But anyway, went in the coffee shop there, and there was John Wayne. So I had my sister, Carolee Oblad, and she got polio when she was a little girl. So she had one leg shorter than the others. And so I always had her go in and sell the newspapers because she always made so much money. So I said, here's the newspaper, take it to John Wayne. I'll bet you he tips you. So she went in the coffee shop, and John Wayne says, oh, sure. And he pulled out a $5 bill and gave her for a newspaper. And boy, that was a lot of money. And I was so happy too, because I got 90%, my sister got But it was always fun having the movies, because it's, you know, going out on the set. We skipped school a few times to go out on the movies. There were a lot of fun. Climbing the hills around Kanab, hunting for petrified wood and arrowheads. And then the dudes would come through on buses and stop at the, what would that call? The laundry. Union Pacific Laundry. And then we would go and sell the dudes different things. And I remember the ones that we made the most profit on were the porcupine eggs. Do any of you know what porcupine eggs are?
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
Yes.
Yeah, they're the cuckleburrs that come on the plants. And we would sell a lot of them to the dudes that really, I was really surprised. But the profit generator was 100%, so it was a lot of fun. And there were so many things going on in Kanab. It was such an ideal way to live at that time. And, you know, working for movies and skipping school. And I know my brother, a couple of my brothers and I, some of you may know Wendell and Patsy left us in 1984, the helicopter crash. But Wendell and Wayne and Charlie and I worked for the movies a lot. And we would get $15 a day. And so they asked for volunteers one day for people that would ride a spirited horse on McKenna's Gold. And maybe you've seen the movie, it's not a very good movie. But anyway. Uh-oh, my time's up. Anyway.
2 minutes.
Anyway, both Brent and Randy was called back then. Brent and Wendell rode the spirited horses, and they got $75 for riding the spirited horses. And we asked, well, how come they get so much and we only get $15? They said, because they might get injured, and it's going to take them a while to recuperate, and so that's why we pay so much money for that. Okay, I'll shut up.
Okay. Thank you. Sharon.
Okay, I go back way further than these guys. I don't remember the porcupine eggs. I probably was never accustomed to those, but it seemed like when I grew up, people didn't have a lot of free time to do anything with. Everyone was busy. The farmers were busy planting crops and harvesting and planting gardens. Most of the mothers stayed home because there were a lot of large families, and so they stayed home and took care of the kids. And when father harvested the garden, then mother did all of the canning. So there were plenty of things for everyone to do. But I did remember and think about a few of the things that I remember that were fun. The first one that came to my mind was the local race meet. Every year in May we had a race meet. And we had a great racetrack up where the I'm not even sure where it was. I mean,
North of
in the
town.
hospital, yeah, it's north of town, the hospital and the library property and some of that they have just cleared off there by the old power plant building. And I remember the race meets were a big thing because there were people from the surrounding areas like Peril and excuse me, Beaver, Panguitch, and of course there were people here in Kanab that had horses also. So that was a fun time, and sometimes moms even got to go to that too. But usually it was because the kids had already gone and she had to go find the kids and bring them home. Sometimes the husbands too. So that was one fun event. There were a couple of clubs that the ladies belonged to. One was called the Ladies Literary League, and that was a fun club. They did things for the civic, for the town. They did some civic things. They had book reports, and once a year they had a big dinner. That was the meeting that they were trying to recruit new members. And so that was a fun time. Everyone would wear their best dress and put on the dog, and it was a fun time. I can't remember the name of the other one. Something auxiliary, it seemed to me like there was another one. And they also did civic things. They always had a booth at the county fair where they sold Pronto pups. So that was another memory. Pronto pups.
Corn dogs.
Hot dog dipped in batter and deep fried. Then there were always ladies that had quilts on. I mean, quilting was a big thing. Number one, they needed it for their winter warmth for their beds. The other thing was it gave the ladies a chance to come and visit, and someone might have a quilt on, and it would be by word of mouth. It would be kind of advertised a little bit. So you might have 4, 5, 6 ladies that would come to quilt for a couple of hours, and then they'd move on to something else or go home and do what work they had neglected while they went to the quilting bee. But that was where they could visit with each other and catch up on the family news, what everyone's children are doing, and all of that. So that was a great pastime for them. And then there was always a county fair, which was always held in Orderville. And that was fine. That's where it should still be. But people, what was that saying?
We're just gonna say wrap it up.
Time's up.
And we're gonna get rid of the 2-minute one.
Okay.
Too fast.
Okay. All right.
But wrap it up. You got 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, okay, we had a good time at the county fair. People could take their quilts, their crocheting, and the 4-H clubs were always involved with that. So 4-H kids could take their things there. They were judged. They had red, white, and blue ribbons, and so that was a fun time for everyone. And I will say here that I don't think Kanab people were very good to support it.
Thank you.
I really didn't feel that way. I did. And I haven't been myself for a few years. So anyway, that was a fun time. So I guess that's all the time. I remember a carnival I went to once. It came to the town square, and in case you don't know what the town square is, I don't have time to tell you.
Well, thank you. That might be one of the questions for later. Okay. Steve, you will be next, and the question is, can you tell us about the school system back then? Explore how schools operated, what kind of education was available, and any memorable experiences, like where the physical school buildings were located, and possible school rivalries. Keep in mind, I'm from Valley. I'm going to add one little statement in here. We had in front of our school in Orderville Valley, this sidewalk divided, and there was a big block of cement with a V on it. It was black and orange.
And we painted it red.
That was my question. Statutes of limitations are over, so you may confess.
Well, I wasn't confessing, I'm colorblind, so it's hard.
We weren't when we went to school that morning. Okay, you are up.
You were brave.
Okay, well, I guess another thing we used to do is club rabbits. We'd go out at night, and of course we didn't have enough money to buy bullets for our guns, and so we clubbed rabbits, and apparently that wasn't such a nice thing now that I think about it. But back then, we would get a lot, and the people out there east of Kanab really thanked us because it cut down on, or made it so they were able to harvest a much better harvest of hay with the rabbits gone. So there are a lot of things like that. We go to the sand dunes, In fact, my family, we're going to sand dunes this year, and our family's been doing it. It's not 89, but I counted the other day. This is the 91st year in a row that we've gone to the sand dunes for Easter. And so I'm back then when I was a little boy. I remember riding on the tractor that had a wagon behind it, and we'd all ride on the wagon. It would take us about 2 hours to get out there, but it was a fun time, and we still have, even in COVID, we had 40 people there. Usually we have about 100 to 125 to 150, and we hope that's what it will be this year. But, just an ideal time growing up here. And you're not even going to put up the sign, so I'll keep going then.
You got 3 minutes. You're doing good.
Okay. Okay, also in 1978, and actually, after I left Kanab, I married the little girl back here, Judy Hallman, and we have 9 children. And shortly after we got married, after we finished graduate school at the University of Utah, we moved to Los Angeles, and I worked for someone most of you know. It's called the Internal Revenue Service. And if you don't know, you'll probably know tomorrow. But anyway, then I audited a number of businesses, and I actually audited 3 McDonald's restaurants. And so I says, that's a business I ought to get into. And so the St. George Boulevard McDonald's, the first one on 798 East St. George Boulevard, came up for sale. And I was at that time a bishop of the ward in Los Angeles. And so we put in a bid for the St. George McDonald's. And so there were 320 people applied for it. They narrowed it down to 10. I was one of the 10. They narrowed it down to 2, and they chose the other guy. However, his dad had a heart attack just as he was taking it over, so he had to take his stores that were down in the valley in Los Angeles. So they offered me the St. George Boulevard McDonald's. So we bought it. We ended up with 6 or 7 McDonald's. And then during that time also that we owned them, we bought Perry Lodge. So we owned Perry Lodge for 40 years. And then Rex Mon called me this time of the year and said, "Hey, I need Perry Lodge." And I said, "It's not for sale." And he says, "Name your price." And so that's why it cost him so much. And we did sell it to him. Okay.
Okay. Sharon's school system.
Okay, this is where my love is in the school system. And I think Kanab has had, through the years, has had pretty good school. There have been a lot of graduates from Kanab High School that have gone on to do some pretty great things. So when they talk about, schools in little towns the kids just don't have a chance. They can't amount to anything. I say no way to that. I was the very last graduating class in the old school building up on the hill where the Kanab Center is now. That was in I shouldn't tell you.
18 what?
1894. No, it was 1955. And that was a very unique, when I think about it now, a unique situation because there was one building. The grades 1 through 6 were on
The south.
On the
South
south.
side.
I don't know east from west, so that's good. From the south, on the south building, there was an auditorium in the middle, and 7 through 12 were on the other side. So that was it. That was our school. And it may not have been ideal. It probably wouldn't be ideal in today's world, but it was okay. And we had good classes. We had good teachers, I thought. There was another building that was south of the old high school. That was the Industrial Arts Building and the Home Ec Building. Back in those days, in Home Ec, they taught you how to cook and sew. I don't think they even have it anymore. I don't know that. And then in the Industrial Arts was the shop building for the boys, and they had woodworking tools, and they learned how to do things like that. While we even had stoves in the Home Ec Building. We could cook little things on the top, and we could bake cookies and cakes in the oven. So that was pretty good. I'm glad that I learned a few things there. We had sewing machines, and we had a teacher that stayed there forever. She was my teacher all through my high school years. Elna Morrill was her name. I'm sure some of you will remember her. Anyway, and then we had Roy Douglas, our music director, teacher in school. We had a great music department. We had a band. We even had a marching band. And I remember fundraisers when we were trying to raise money for new band uniforms, because the ones that were there, I don't know which boat they came across on, but it was a red cape with white satin lining, and it was just a cape, no sleeves, but it had a clasp at the neck, so you could at least keep it on. But anyway, we decided we needed new band uniforms, so we had a couple of fundraisers, and we did really good. We got took in quite a bit of money for that, and then a local gentleman, when we had reached up here somewhere, he donated enough to finish buying the band uniforms, and I never did know who that was. But we were happy when we got our new band uniforms. And then of course we had football, basketball, track. We didn't play baseball in those days, but there were tennis courts down. Some of you might remember the tennis courts that were down. I don't know what's there now. Maybe the annex. No, I don't think the annex. I don't know, because I can't remember. But anyway, there were kids during PE, if they wanted to, they could go play tennis. Or once in a while, we would go out on the football field because it was grassy finally, and we would get a little softball game going. So, and there was always a little competition, but that was okay too. And I noticed on the questions it asked about the competition, and is it okay if I tell them, Spence?
Depends. I know. Yes, absolutely.
It was the rivalry between Valley and Kanab. That's been alive as long as I remember, and I always wished that it wasn't, because I thought we needed to do more things together. Let's see. Oh, and we learned how to, okay, one more thing. We learned how to write cursive. Can't write anymore. And we didn't have computers. We had to use our computer. So times have changed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joyce,
Oh,
school system.
Well, yeah, the first school that Sharon was talking about was on what they call the Monument Hill, where you see piles of dirt now that they were bringing out. But we moved off that hill from that building when I was in beginning the 8th grade. So I have many memories of the good old school on the hill. One of them was a first grade, and that was a Mrs. Peterson. So
Eva.
I don't remember her first name.
It was Eva.
Mrs.
Eva.
Peterson.
It was
She was wonderful. So, by show of hands, did anyone make these? Do you remember?
No, but my kids did.
Joyce did. Yeah. Oh yes. Oh, we had to carefully put our hand in our little plaster of Paris in our little plate, and then we carefully brought our hand out. Somebody put a nail in it, so we could hang them on the wall. And then a couple of days later, we got to paint them our favorite color. So that's one of the big things I remember. And then I remember the shop and the home ec building. And then in the 3rd grade, we had Mrs. Clara Shields. She was our health teacher. She had a health chart. And when we got to school, we lined up, and I was so grateful that we had the smallest class in the whole school, from the kindergarten to seniors. We had
14.
about 18 altogether.
14. I just looked in the yearbook. 14 when you
No.
were seniors.
There's a discrepancy there. Okay.
We had 36.
Well,
There's your answer.
we were after the war, so see, a bit almost still at the war time, so we didn't have as many in our class. Anyway, we'll cover that another time.
14.
Well, okay,
Sorry,
so
Joyce.
that was, and then in the 6th grade, we had Mr. Maynor was our teacher. We learned about interplanetary travel. We learned about the medieval knights and different things like that. And we got to have our parents come and see what we had done, because it took up most of the room. That's what I remember, is the hands-on things we did. And then in the 8th grade, towards the end of our 8th grade year, our class, plus maybe your class, Sharon, I don't know, the senior, anyway, we got the opportunity to go up the creek to the first, the first term past the port of entry, and we got to plant some willows for, willow erosion and flood control. And I remember Mr. Tejan was in charge of this. Somebody brought in their tractor, their backhoe, made a ditch, and then somebody else had a tractor, and they pulled the limb into the trench, and all these, new shoots were coming up, and all of us kids we brought a shovel from home. We shoveled in the dirt. So now when you go by that little area and see all those willows, they're protecting that highway there. So that was what we did, that I remember. And then in home ec, there was a representative from the Kellogg's company that came to Kanab with his box of Special K cereal. He had us convinced that this box of cereal was named after Kanab. And it's been my favorite cereal ever since. And then we have to remember Blanche Schmace as our librarian. She was awesome. I think I checked out every Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew stories there were. And then okay, so you talked about Orderville being our rivalry, and I only remember that because of sports, because everything else, most of Orderville was related. But I never could figure out why Orderville would choose black and orange for Halloween to have all year long. I never figured that color out. And then it's time to stop. But I have one more thing, and that was when Mr. Burgoyne taught us in American Problems. And when we went to school that day, he would ask us what the news was for that day in America. we didn't have any way of knowing what the news was, except for David Frost. He had a television. So he got A and all of us didn't. So those are my memories
Thank
in
you
that
so much.
category.
Do any of you remember in the 1950s when the school board came up with the idea to consolidate Valley High and Kanab High School and build a high school up on the sand?
Oh, my heavens.
Do you remember that?
We
I
do.
do not.
Yeah.
You
We
do.
voted against it.
Yeah, prayers are answered. Okay. Last question. And this will be, Sharon, you will start this off.
Okay, but
What were the most common jobs or industries in town? Can you share any stories about local businesses or shops that were important to the town?
before I get into that, I should have mentioned the library and the importance, that the important part that the library, which is now our museum, it played an important part in the high school and in school, because students could go over to the library and do their homework or study or whatever. And there was always a librarian there that was helpful, Mrs. Mays, Mrs. Parks. So that's to me is a real. Besides which, that's where I went to kindergarten, was in the basement of the museum. So okay, now get where I'm supposed to be. Common jobs or industries. You know, the only industry I can ever remember around here was the Kanab sawmill. But I can't remember when that was started. So I don't know what people did before that.
1942.
That's when it was started.
Ooh.
In Fredonia.
Yes, it was.
Well, it was started before that, but it moved to Fredonia in 1942.
Okay.
And 3 of the Heaton brothers bought it, and a guy that was mad at one of the Heaton, who was a judge, burned it down the next day.
Wow.
And I know his name, and I'm not allowed to.
Well, aren't you Mr. Knowledge?
Mr. Google.
No, it's not. Remember, I was a gear jammer for 3 years for Utah Park, and I talked with the dudes all the way from Lund to Cedar to Zion to North Rim to Bryce Canyon to Cedar Break back to the train, and I had to keep them entertained. So I had to make up a lot of things, and I have no idea which ones are true and which ones are
Well, watch out. Someone back there said Mr. Google, so maybe you better not depend on Mr. Google. Anyway, there were always, jobs around, like waitressing jobs, room cleaning jobs. We had our own, power plant. So we had our own power, and I'm sure that employed people. We have always had a hospital. So there were, and I can remember several doctors. Dr. Norris is the first one I remember. Dr. Aiken. I remember a Dr. Witters that came and was here for a little while. We had a Dr. Hodges. We had
Sunwell.
yeah, there were a couple before Sunwell though, but I can't remember. Anyway, and of course there were the local stores. My father-in-law, Preston Bunning, started the very first grocery store here in town. There was no refrigeration, and they had to go pick up their supplies, their canned stuff, to bring to the store. He killed its own. That was before there wasn't a grade A meat situation here, so he killed its own beef, pork, chickens, and dressed them out and took care of them. And they cut big blocks of ice from 3 lakes and brought down and put in. They had platforms made out of bricks and planks and they would put and sawdust, and they would put the ice in there, and that was how they kept their meat cold, as cold as they could. And he was in business. I was going to look that up today and I forgot. Probably 50 years. He moved locations a couple of times after his boys got big enough to take over the grocery store. And there were a couple of other little stores. My favorite store to go in was Mr. Ackerman's. We always called it the Kanab Equitable. And I don't know if that's right or wrong. I don't know if it's Kanab Equitable or what it should be. Anyway, it was an Equitable when I grew up. And it was all mostly canned goods. But I remember a big table as you went through the front door, a big square one. And in the summertime, if people had extra produce that they didn't want out of their gardens, they could bring it to the Equitable, and he would let them, put it on the table there, and it could be sold, it could be purchased there. But the thing I remember the most were these big square glass
Yes.
candy
Yes.
jars. The lid wasn't up here; it was down here, so that you could stick your little hand in. And he always had 3 or 4 with different kinds of penny candy in. So you could stick your hand in and get. And I used to go there with my dad about once a week because Mr. Ackerman, who was a little character, but they always had business to discuss. Don't ask me what. He was our neighbor, as well as our little grocery man. But if I was a really good girl and stood there quietly while they did their business, then when they were finished, I would get the nod. And I could choose one piece of candy out of one of those. And I didn't have to pay for it. So that was my treat. On the west side of the store was
Sorry, I'm the bad guy.
anyway, it was a fun store. I wish you could have been there.
Okay, we're going to move to Steve. We'll have you next, and then we'll have.
Okay, I'll be real quick. Of course, back when we were kids, we had drama at Helen Burgoyne. And the year that we were seniors, we won everything at stake. And some of the ironic things that happened, Charlotte Young was the lead on the women, and Kim Ford was the lead on the men. I'm sorry, and Doug Keller was the lead on the men. Well, about halfway through practice, Doug Keller and his brother, Alma got in a fight, and Alma broke Doug's jaw. And so they had to wire his jaw closed. Well, that's why he still heard with Doug before he died. He always still talked that way because he was used to talking with his mouth wired shut. So anyway, they had to get someone to take his place, so they had Kim Ford. And so he became the lead man, and Charlotte Young, and they both won Best Actor and Best Actress for Class B schools in the state of Utah, and we won first place in our play, which was Spreading the News. And my line was, "And here is the blood on the road to prove it." Prove it. And I was supposed to say, "Prove it." Anyway, there were a lot of good days, and even Helen Burgoyne. We always had to be quiet with Helen Burgoyne, because if you weren't, you would know about it.
She was Miss Perfection.
She was a tremendous. And the other thing is, when I went to college, I didn't have to take freshman English because I had Helen Burgoyne for English in Kanab High School. And because of the play, then I tried out for a play at Southern Utah University. The play was Romeo and Juliet, and I wasn't Juliet.
I actually saw that play.
It was a good one, wasn't it?
It was good.
I was probably there.
That was the first time I was proud of someone from Kanab. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Joyce. Finish up and
Okay, I'll finish up.
jobs and industry.
Okay, and I remember that my father worked for Kanab Industries. For every year we went out to the mountain to be with my dad in the summertime, and it was just a wonderful occasion to do that. And I remember Dan's modern cash store more than yours, because my mom would bring home S&H green stamps when she would buy some groceries, and we got to lick those stamps and put them in a book, and when the book was full we took it back to Dan.
And you got dishes.
And we have a whole set. Yes, cups and saucers and bowls and cleaners and sugar bowls, and it looks just like the teeny blossoms that are coming on my brand new apple tree. And guess what? It's not made in China. And then, and on the corner was Pickett's.
Picket lumber, yes.
Pickett's lumber. And do you know what was in the back of Pickett's store? It was a morgue.
No, Joyce, it wasn't in the back of the store. There was a little white house behind the store.
Well, they said it was attached. But I just know that we hurried really fast to get by that place because we just knew it smelled.
It didn't, because I lived in the house right next to
I know you did. Okay, and then you talked about the tourists, and you sold them these little porcupine eggs. We would get a little box and put a little tea towel in the box, and we'd pick up rocks and put them nicely in a row in the box, and we'd take them to the Union Pacific Laundry where the bus stopped. And when the tourists would get off the bus, we'd say, "Would you like to buy a rock?" And sometimes they'd toss in a penny, and if we got a dime, we thought we were really fortunate. But they would say, "Just keep your rock." Yeah. So, and then I remember Neil Crosby's store. I don't know what it was called besides Neil Crosby's store.
It was the Kanab drug.
Was it the Kanab drug then, or was
Yes.
it?
Or
Or
eat
was
it.
it Edolph's or Fenton's?
Well, it was still the Kanab drug, but it was owned and operated by the Edolphs.
Okay.
Mr. Edolph.
Well,
was
I
the
just thought Neil Crosby did everything there except he was behind the counter filling people's prescriptions, but I never went there to do that. I went there to buy the funny books, the comic books, and we shared them until they were all worn out. And then later on, that's where I bought my clarinet reeds and my sheet music. He was up on whatever was popular, and he would order it, and I would go there and take my babysitting money, 25 cents an hour, and buy my sheet music. And how do you remember Neef's shoe shop,
Shoe
where
repair,
we'd have our shoes repaired? In the summertime, when it was warm, they'd open the doors and you could smell that leather, and then the pool hall next door. And anyway, you would walk by and you'd look in Neef's shoe shop, and up in the corner there was a little black and white TV. And we never did see anything on it except squiggly lines. So we would see if we had reception in Kanab yet. We finally did when we were
We
about
finally
seniors.
did when we won a TV, and we had the only TV in town.
Oh my! Oh, those were the days. And then one more thing we did: we did everything by the sound of the town clock. And one of the biggest things we did was we took the water from the neighbors. If you had irrigation water, when that clock chime, you'd raise up the head gate and the water would come through. You would water your garden and your lawn, your trees, and then in about 20 minutes or a half hour, the neighbors took the water from you, like the Tates, and they raised up their head gate and the water went through so they could water. And that's what we did. We had open ditches. That's how we watered our gardens. And then in later days, I actually got to work at the Union Pacific Laundry, and that's where the Grand Canyon, Bryce Canyon, Cedar Breaks, and Zion. So a truck would go gather up all of their, their sheets and towels and everything and bring them to Kanab, and we would wash them, run them through the mangle, iron them, whatever, fold them up, and then the truck would put them back on the truck and take them back to the parks.
And when we would have the break at the laundry, we would eat watermelons that we had heisted from trucks as they went through Kanab.
You did. Oh, that's pretty.
Okay, thank you. I think we've learned a lot about Steve. Anyway, we'll have a few minutes for questions. We'll probably want to wrap up. We'll take a few minutes, and Joyce has a mic, so if you have a question, just raise your hand and have at it.
So my question is for all of you native Kanab citizens, you use this term that I still am not exactly sure about. It's down the lane.
That's where our field was.
If you're not from here, you're like, wait, what do you mean by that? But what exactly do you mean when you say down the lane?
It's towards Fredonia, but we didn't go that far. We just went down the lane.
So you guys don't know either.
I know there was a pond down there you could swim in at the start of it, and my Aunt Afton and Uncle Carl lived on it.
We also have a comment from the audience.
Yeah, down the lane started at about where the fire station is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And went south,
Yeah.
and there was always cottonwood trees on both sides of the road. I
Exactly.
used to ride my horse down to where Stampin' Up is now. He's probably buried there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
So I heard from Arlen Chamberlain that he used to take the cows across the creek, and then there were a few bad storms, and that's what made the creek be so far down low. Do you all remember any of that, or is he just making up stories?
No, that is true. It is true. The creek kept getting deeper and deeper, and we'd take the cows there during the daytime and bring them back home and milk them at night. And then the next morning.
And another story about that is the quicksand in the creek.
Yeah, they
And
got a lot of
Steve,
cows.
do you remember that Steve got stuck in the quicksand?
Yeah, but it was only for a few days.
Oh! My brother said he was in up to his chin, and it took two of us to pull him out. So if Royce helped pull him
Royce
out,
did help.
who was the other one?
Wayne, my
Your
brother.
brother. I mean, that's what the boys did. They just kept wiggling to just see how far they could go.
It used to didn't go down that far, but for some reason it kept getting deeper.
Yeah,
Kind of like this story.
exactly.
I have some history documents that talk about when that the Kanab Creek started as an irrigation ditch, but over the years it just kept getting deeper and
You know,
deeper.
my grandmother could jump across it at any
Really?
point. Yeah.
Well, I think it was my great grandfather that had something to do with building the dam, and in his history he talks about that.
Anybody else?
Wow, you answered all the questions.
Okay.
One more thing, no one has mentioned the old Kanab Center. It wasn't called that. It was called the Ward Hall.
Yeah.
And that old building played a big part in Kanab all the years that I remember. There were, you could do anything in it. They had civic things there. They had wild woolly dances after the race meet. They had school functions there. My senior year, we had our senior ball in there. So it was kind of a multi-purpose building, just like our new Kanab Center is. So I've quit referring to it as the Ward Hall.
But they had a boxing ring there also.
Yes, they
When
did.
Tonto
Yes, they
and the Lone Ranger
We're
were
here.
there, they were paying people to box.
And I remember when they were here.
Okay, I have a question. Joyce, you mentioned that you talked about going sleigh riding in the winter. What's the most snow you remember us getting here in Kanab?
Oh my goodness. Oh,
16 feet?
16 inches. I just remember how when they shoveled the snow, I could hardly see over it, to make a path. But it was so cold, and like he said, we got ice off of the 3 days, and
The deep snow was out,
oh,
not
yeah.
out in Utah, Alton, Utah.
Alton. Yeah.
They tumbled from their front doors to the out to the barn or wherever they
Oh,
had
yeah.
to go.
In 1971, the year after we moved here, we had 24 inches in June.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I can remember because we had to dig Don's car out so he could go to work.
In 1939, when my dad died, there was 3 feet of snow in Kanab.
Uh-huh.
Who was your dad?
Those were the
Alfred Johnson.
good old
We
days.
used to own the Johnson Ranch out in Johnson Canyon, the one just before you cross the bridge as you're going up. I think the church owns it now.
That's the church ranch now.
Yeah, we own that ranch. My dad was killed out on that ranch, so.
Any other questions?
Okay, and I have one more thing too.
Raise your hand if you have another question.
I just wanted to say that I don't know, now I'm born and raised here, and I don't know if all of you know that when there's no moon, you can look up at the Cahill. Of course, I live close by the Cahill, and when there's not very many lights on and the sky is dark, you can look at the Cahill and it actually glows. So if you've never noticed that, put that on your schedule. It's very interesting.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been absolutely great. Joyce, did you have? Yeah, I will add one thing. I'm from Mortarville, but spent a lot of time here, a very enjoyable time. My wife is also a graduate from Valley High, but she kind of liked some of the Kanab boys. Joyce.
Any of the ones here tonight?
I thank you. It's not enough to say how much I appreciate our panel, the effort you made, the stories, the giggles, the laughs, and I could nod my head a lot with those things I remember. And the crowd, I'm delighted. I'm delighted. And I guess I have a question. Would you be interested in coming back for another session? Not with these people. Not this search, but with another group of people who are maybe a little younger, and share maybe what it was like in the 50s and 60s.
No 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Right.
We could do the 70s and 80s, but what we could, would you be interested in?
Yes.
All right. Thank you again for coming. It's been an awesome evening.
Oh, and to leave us, my dad used to always say, I'm sure that Heavenly Father appreciates a good joker. He wouldn't have made some of us.